This is my third video, and all the links will be in the description about how falsely this bishop is teaching. And this is at how corrupted they are at the top of the church. And what he's going to be actually teaching from is what's known as a doctrine, which means it's a Vatican approved, and all the priests for the Roman Catholic Church around on the earth here all have to preach it the way he's preaching it, okay? So I got a real problem with this guy, because what happens after we die? Now listen to some of this stuff.
As you can see that I have. Now, what I want to do, everybody, is pause here, because as I mentioned last week, when we're talking about the resurrection, we're talking about the central point of Christian faith, the hinge upon which the whole of Christianity turns. So to understand what we're dealing with here is exceptionally important. Go back to this time and place. Go back to the Eastern Mediterranean of first century. There were a lot of views floating around about what happens to us when we die. So stay first in a Jewish context. There are lots and lots of texts in the Old Testament, and this became a standard view for many Jews, that, when we die, we die. We simply go back into the dust of the earth. Dust, and to dust you shall return. Think of the psalmist.
Okay, now that's not really true. But remember, Jews, that word is reserved for those who didn't believe Jesus and don't believe our Creator anymore. You should be using the word Israelis as those who were the ones that honored and respected our Creator. But let me show this guy. Back in Genesis time, verse 4, or chapter 4, verse 9, when Cain killed Abel, our Creator is talking to him, and he says, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. Now, we know it's not his blood, so you can cross out the word blood. And we know that it's your brother is crying to me from the ground. That means that he's still alive, okay? And his soul has gone into the ground. Now, let me go a little bit farther here and talk about when Moses is told that when he's going to die in Deuteronomy 32:50, and this is, I think, our Creator's words here, then die on the mountain where you ascend. This was when they were coming into the promised land. They were still on the east side of the Jordan, and he's not going to get to go into the promised land, so he's going to, our Creator's telling him to go up this mount. They were down by the valley where there's river, where there's water that they needed. But the object is this is what it means. This is not a mountain. This is really a mount where you ascend and be gathered to your people. So, in other words, since Adam and Eve's time, that when you died, you were going into the ground. And then you were going to be gathered to your people, okay? And again, we have Aaron, your brother, died on Mount Hor and was gathered to his people. Well, they absolutely are the same people, because they're supposed to be born from Levi. So the thing here is there's a lot of corruption in the text. But now you know that this place under the ground where everyone is going at this time, and then I'll let him continue here.
Who says, Lord, can the dust give you praise? He's saying, look, keep me alive. Now that I'm alive, I can praise you. But once I'm dead, I just return to dust. So one view is that this life is it. That's all there is. We die, and we die like any other animal. Another view within a Jewish context, you can see it in a lot of texts in the Old Testament, is that the dead go to a shadowy place called Sheol. No one wants to go to Sheol. No one is looking forward to it. It's not some place of fulfillment and peace. It's a kind of shadowy half-life.
Okay. Not where somebody wants to go. Our Creator's telling them that's where your soul goes, but you don't want to go there. How do you stay alive then? This guy is just so... Let me talk about the word Sheol here. this is the Bible program I have, and when I click on the word Sheol here in Psalm 49:15, you can see this is the Hebrew word over here. So they kept the Hebrew word. And then down here it tells there's 66 times that they used the word Sheol in the verses. So it wasn't just some unknown first century belief. And then there might be something else that Jews believe in. Well, I got a surprise for this guy. Nathan come along and told David, our Creator wants me to tell you that from your son's seed, he will become a king, and I will give him a kingdom in heaven. This is what all of a sudden the promise goes, that you're now going to be redeemed out of Sheol to enter into heaven. You have the words redeemed, you have the word save, you have salvation, you have Savior. It's all about entering into heaven, leaving Sheol to separate now the evil ones from those that were obedient to our Creator. But they aren't going to leave until Jesus' kingdom is established. Okay? Now, there is a prophet, I think it's Ezekiel, that he's prophesied to talk about these dead bones, to put them back together, and he see them, and then he told them to command breath so they're alive. And then our Creator's telling them that these are all in Sheol, and they're complaining, how long do we have to wait before Jesus appears? So maybe he forgot that, what Ezekiel said too, but your soul, remember, is going to go into the abyss until Jesus' time. So you can't have a choice whether you want to go or not go. Listen to this guy.
Text in the Old Testament is that the dead go to a shadowy place called Sheol. No one wants to go to Sheol. No one is looking forward to it. It's not some place of fulfillment and peace. It's a kind of shadowy half-life. A bit here, if you look in the ancient Greek stories and myths, read the Iliad, the Odyssey. You know, when the great heroes are doing their work here on Earth, well, that's when they're in the bright light of...
Did you just see that he went to talk about paganism as the great heroes of life? I mean, come on now. He's trying to convince you that the pagan world has a better belief
of the sun, and people can see what they do and can praise them. When they die, they go into a similar kind of shadowy underworld. They're around, but they're not, in the bright light of fame. They're not living life in the full sense. So that idea was also floating around in Jesus' time. A third view, and you can see it, for example, in the Pharisees. The Sadducees were the ones who said, no, when you die, that's it. You just go into the ground and that's it.
Okay. Now, what he's doing here, talking about the Pharisees and Sadducees, as being an off sect, that they had their own belief. Well, I want to teach you what Jesus taught me about Pharisees. Okay? So let me scroll down here and say, well, Jesus teaches me in Matthew 23:2, the scribes and the Pharisees have seated themselves in the chair of Moses. Moses was a judge. He was known as a judge. They didn't have kings, they had judges. Okay? So this word has to be judges have seated themselves in the chair of Moses. And then down here, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were sitting there. They were the judges, okay? So now, let me show you another verse about what Jesus says. In Luke 11:43, woe to you, judges, for you love to sit in the front seat of the synagogue and the respectful greeting in the marketplaces. That means they weren't an off sect. They're sitting in the front seats at the synagogue. They want the most important, closest to the hear what's being said. So they aren't some off sect, and who would greet an off sect not believing like they believe? I don't get this guy. I don't. The text is so corrupt. The Pharisee is a judge. Now, John, when he sees the Pharisees and Sadducees coming to him, he called them a brood of vipers. Well, that's putting them like similar. So it's got to be judges and lawyers, okay? They're all corrupt at this time. They aren't following our Creator. They're twisting the law. All kinds of corruption going on here. But he's all happy to start talking about these guys and actually didn't learn from Jesus. It's written right there.
But the Pharisees said, no, we believe in the resurrection of the righteous at the end of time. The idea here is that, people die, and then eventually, at the close of the age, at the end of time, the righteous dead will come back to life. That view was also around at the time of Jesus. And then broaden the perspective out. Look in the Greek and Roman world. You read the texts of Plato, and you find a view that, it's very interesting to me, is very common today. In fact, I think even a lot of Christians, if you scratch the surface of their belief, they're going to come up with kind of a Greek idea, which is this, that the soul, the spirit, is kind of buried inside the body. Plato says it's imprisoned there. And the whole point of the philosophical life and the spiritual life is to effect a kind of prison break. The soul can finally escape from the restrictions of the body, and then it can live on in this purely spiritual realm. As I say, I think a lot of even, Bible-believing people think of heaven that way, that I've somehow just left the body behind, and now my soul goes on. You see that in Roman mythology, and even in Roman public life. There was a view that some great heroes, like the generals and the emperors, after they die, would go up to the heavenly realm, live with the gods on Mount Olympus. There's a
okay. He really likes turning to paganism, doesn't he? Okay, now he just mentioned Mount Olympus. The New American Standard Bible is the only Bible where you're going to find these verses, and that's Psalms 48, verses 1 and 2, and it says Mount Zion is the mountain of our Creator, and our Creator lives above Mount Zion, okay, in the far north. The far north is the North Star. The motions of the stars makes this mountain. So they knew this is where our Creator was ascending to and descending from, where Moses looked to heaven and raised his staff and asked for the plague to start, where Jesus looked to heaven and said, let me feed the 500 people. And don't think it's 5,000. Come on. All the numbers are wrong in the Bible. So that is where they knew where heaven was located. So yet he wants to turn to the Greek and Romans and call it Mount Olympus to be above where the gods are at, but doesn't understand where Jesus looked to heaven and asked for a blessing. So I got a problem with this guy, and you can see why here. So
famous story about the Emperor Vespasian on his deathbed, and he senses death coming. And he says to one of the people, well, I think I'm becoming a god. So that was a Roman view, not unlike the Greek view, that, after we die, the soul escapes from the body. Now, here's the interesting thing, everybody, and I want you to listen carefully because this is the hinge idea, right? If Christ has not been raised, we're still in our sins. If Christ has not been raised, we're the most pitiable of people. So this is the hinge idea of Christianity. Notice, please, how none of these things that I've described is on offer here. So clearly not saying that Jesus died and then just went back into the dust of the earth. No, clearly not. They're talking about Jesus risen from the dead. They're not talking about Sheol at all. They're not saying, oh yeah, Jesus died and he went to Sheol and maybe his ghost kind of came up from Sheol. Remember that story? It's in 2 Samuel about the witch of Endor who calls forth the shade of the prophet Samuel. You call him up from Sheol. This is exactly why in the story they think they're seeing a ghost. So they're
Okay, did you hear that? Think they're seeing a ghost. I want you to hear that again.
It's in 2 Samuel about the witch of Endor who calls forth the shade of the prophet Samuel. You call him up from Sheol. This is exactly why in the story they think they're seeing a ghost. So they're operating out of that perspective, like, oh, maybe this is a ghost come up.
A ghost? Okay. Actually, I want to take you to the verse itself. It's Samuel 1:28, verses 12 and 13. Now, this isn't a witch. This is a conjurer, okay? At that time, Saul was commanded, or in all the kings and judges were to kill off anybody not believing in our Creator, witches, conjurers, spiritualists, those that believed in false gods. But Saul had a problem. Samuel had died, and when he was going to the priest, our Creator wasn't talking to them. So he seeks out this conjurer, okay, who he wants to talk to, Samuel. And Samuel's going to tell him that you're going to be down here with me. So he doesn't even get the story a little bit farther that Samuel's going to tell him you're going to die and come down here with me. So, but what it is here, I wanted to show you here in verse 13, where she says, the king said to her, do not be afraid. What do you see? And the woman said to Saul, I see a divine being coming up out of the earth. I know the Trinitarians, they think Jesus is divine, but that makes our Creator quite a liar. But the thing here is my Bible program, when I click on the word divine, I get the word Elohim, and that's the word for the title God, 2,325 times. And then they got like gods. So here's the problem. One time as a divine being, okay? Elohim. So let me see here. And the woman said to Saul, I see a God coming up from the earth, okay? So, but it is actually your souls. Your souls were down in the abyss until the time that Jesus's body died on the cross. So let me show this guy and you some words here. Now, I've put all the verses together with like stories, and this is Jesus breathing his last breath here in Luke 23:46, and then the text would follow what would happen next, 27 verse 51 and 52. And the earth shook, and the roof fell, and the house cracked into two from top to bottom, and from our graves many souls ascended to heaven. So Ezekiel's bunch of guys down there who were complaining, waiting for Jesus, well, they finally got to go home into heaven, to the place that our Creator told Jacob he is going to provide a resting place for Jacob. But here, he doesn't even understand the story that immediately Jesus didn't go down to Sheol for a half life, that when his body died, he immediately went into heaven, his kingdom started, and the promise that from David's son's seed, everyone will enter into his kingdom who obeys me, our Creator. So that's what's so important about the commandments. Those are sins, like I've taught you in the other videos. So the thing here is you have to understand this guy is really corrupt. He's not really one who believes what the text says. I mean, at no time did he tell you that you're going to heaven, okay? And Jesus is in heaven. So if you guys want me to do another video on him, you pick the video. Just try to make it under 15 minutes so I don't have to teach 30, 40 different verses and make it too long. Try to keep them, or if there's just a section, then I will do that you're interested in. And because I know he's saying these things, and to you, you're thinking these are important, but if you think there's something a little bit wrong with them and you want to know the more truth, I'm here to bring your belief to a trust. And like it says over here again, Jesus commanded you, or us, unless we become righteous, our righteousness surpasses the scribes. Jesus right there is telling you the scribes are evil and they've corrupted the text. So you have to, your righteousness or your obedience to our Creator has to exceed them, and then you would be able to do what I'm doing, and then you will be able to enter into heaven. Although Jesus says you will not enter my heaven and kingdom, in my kingdom in heaven. But I'm sure that if you're trying to be as obedient to our Creator, you will make it. The thing here is Jesus is really telling you that you got to look at the text and think reasonably with logic what is true and what is not true. Because whatever they're teaching around the world at the Catholic Church, what he just said about, what happens after we die, he didn't get around to it. Because right now, everyone who dies since Jesus' time, if you're evil, you're down there in Sheol, okay? I call it the abyss. And then what happens is anyone who's good is going to ascend into heaven and be in Jesus' kingdom. Now, the thing here is there is going to be, when Jesus comes again, that all of a sudden all man on earth will be dead and the good will rise and go into his kingdom. The rest will descend into Sheol or the abyss. And then our Creator is going to make another dimension of time and space called hell. And forever they're divided. Just like Abraham was telling that one guy that there's this distance between us is too far for you to come across. I can't think of the story. I know he was a rich guy and the other guy was had many sores and ate the food that the guy was throwing out. So, but the object is there's many stories there that tell us that everybody stole before Jesus' time, descended into the abyss or Sheol, and now you know that when the kingdom started, then you didn't have to go visit the abyss to be down there and be harassed unless you were gathered to your good people. So anyways, like I said, why watch this guy? I mean, and that's a bishop.